Hello, assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And let's just talk about this because I know that with all the things that I've said, people are probably thinking, oh, I'm anti marriage. And, it's not that. If you listened actually to any and all of my podcasts properly, you would know that it's not about that. It's about what we do in order to enforce marriage as an institution and how it is in itself, there's nothing wrong with it, but how we have made everything wrong with it, how we have manipulated and exploited it to the extent, the way we have manipulated and exploited everything really in today's world. I think, as I said, we are a demented, unhinged, psychotic world now. Everything's a mess. We are going towards an implosion. We are going towards self-destruction. We're already halfway there anyway. As we know, being it, a timeline that we have to follow. Because of that, it's going to be not overnight, but it is going to be a gradual process until it hits you. And then you would think, when did it go wrong? When the truth is actually you can trace when it went wrong. It went wrong a long time ago. It went wrong when we started pushing the agenda of marriage and children just to prove ourselves to society. It became a problem when parents, their priorities were that they had to get their children married no matter what. And so they forgot the ultimate reason behind marriage. They forgot the vows and what the vows of marriage mean. And they forgot the actual reason and context behind marriage. And all of these pooled in. And as I said, now people are falling in love for the sake of falling in love. They are falling in lust for the sake of falling in lust. Because now we feel that we are abnormal if we don't do these things. This is how it has become now. Now it's abnormal not to wreak havoc on earth or not to poison yourself to death. It's now abnormal to try and live a straight life, an honest life, a decent life. It is now abnormal to try and make wise decisions. This whole, again, where the media has played a huge role in misconstruing. Again, they probably set about with an honest idea and a positive message that don't think, just jump. But the truth is, there is a reason why we think and we don't jump. There is a reason why you have risk analysis in business, why you have risk analysis in marriage originally too. And it becomes very problematic when people try to make everything negative. If you're falling in love and getting married, everybody makes it a negative thing. If you're not falling in love and getting married, everybody makes it a negative thing. These people, they're just getting married and falling in love, and they don't even know what they're jumping into. Oh, these people, they've turned marriage into a contract and it's a business and it's so cold-hearted and cold-blooded. Yeah, well, you know what? Marriage is essentially a contract. You are supposed to have both feelings and rationality, both together, because it is a lifetime commitment. We call it a lifetime commitment for a reason, right? Because it is a commitment into which we pour our hearts and our souls, we pour out our finances, we pour our emotions, we drain everything from within. This is something that we invest our whole lives into. And that is why it is supposed to be a lifetime commitment. And when you're making lifetime commitments, then you are supposed to be extra careful. You can't just jump into it without taking into account the risk factors, And then that is also one of the biggest reasons why, again, as I said, because parents have got their priorities all wrong. And so they've instilled in their children from a young age also that the ultimate goal in life is marriage. And without that, you have achieved nothing. You have failed. Just like how the media is always drilling it into us that, the ultimate goal is falling in love. And if you do not fall in love, you haven't lived. It's rubbish. It's absolutely rubbish, as I've said before. We are supposed to learn how to live evolved lives with evolved minds. Instead, we are getting down to the bottomless pit of the abyss itself. And you know what? Surprise, surprise, the abyss has already started looking back at us. And that is why now we are going into this deep, dark recess, into this deep, dark nothingness. and implosion and self-destruction. And that is also why we're deteriorating as a civilization. There is an ever bigger in order to avoid the impacts of the negative and explosive impacts of a bad marriage. That is why people stopped getting married, and they decided, you know what, it's better to just live in sin, in other words, or in modern terms, as we would say, it's better to just live together as life partners without getting married. At least we know we can break free. But again, you know what, once you're bound, you're bound. You can't break free, isn't it? As I just touched upon, abusive relationships. And now, despite the fact that people are not married, but they still can't get out of it. And so it's even worse when you are married and you can't get out of it, isn't it? But at least there are some safety nets. But again, the whole point is that the emotional toil that it takes when you commit yourself to another person, marriage or no marriage, that toil is in itself enough to destroy somebody. One would think that we are robust enough to survive through it all. But okay, let me now put in front of you just a few cases that are just the few most recent cases, although there are many others that I can talk about. But I think I'll try to talk about the recent ones at length and tell you why marriage scam is now an industry, and why even those that you do not consider marriage scams are in fact marriage scams. Okay, now for quite a number of years, in fact for almost 2 decades at least, we have had this rising scam, where you have people who are apparently rich, well established, they have houses, they have cars and everything, and then they come and they want to get want to ask for your daughter's hand, for example. And so many girls' parents, they what they see, and people are again going to make negative remarks saying, oh, you know what, so this was, they were looking at the worldly aspects of it, they were just looking at the money. No, because remember, in Islam also, it is extremely important. This is what you need to look at in Islam as well. You need to look at the character of the person, you need to find out what the family is all about, the background, everything. But you must also see if the man can afford a wife, and if he can afford to give her a separate house, a separate kitchen, a separate unit, where she can live independently, and where he needs to also afford, if he can afford to give her help, as in servants, and, facilitator, and his children. It's all on the man. So the man has to be able to afford it. That is the first condition that is put upon a man in Islam for marriage. So, as I said, this whole joint family system is basically haram. It's not even allowed in Islam, it's forbidden. But in our societies, we give precedence, again, you see, of culture over religion. But I've talked about that like 1,000 times already. So let's just move past that. Now here we are. We've had these kind of, marriages, and these were scams. These were out and out scams. Why? Because when the girl would get married, she would find out that these people are either from the red light area and they've moved to a decent area, but they're still continuing with their whole thing, but they hide it from. Now, the thing about people who come from the red light area and are heavily involved in prostitution and all is they do not involve their daughters-in-law in that, and they keep them covered, and they keep them in under strict rules of not coming in front of anybody, and not coming out, not leaving the house, and this and that. And so it's very abnormal in the way where the whole family is into this whole prostitution business, but they do not involve their sister-in-laws or daughter-in-laws in it, obviously. But then it becomes very odd and extraordinary when the way this, the restrictions, that the extraordinary restrictions that they start putting on them, basically to hide themselves. It's like, obviously, if she's going to be out and about, she's going to find out the truth about them. This was one scam that became very, very, it was a whole scandal. Another scam that was a whole scandal was that, again, such very similar people. You had big houses, loads of cars, you're showing that you're established, you're showing that your son is established, you impress the people with falsified documents and degrees and anything else, falsified information, and again, the problem is, as I said before, parents and grandparents and families, they used to do their due diligence, but mind you, that didn't mean that they would be safe. Even in the old times when everybody did their due diligence, where they asked about the family, then they asked from their neighbors, they asked from their relatives, they asked from people around, they asked from people with whom they did business, people with whom they worked, they asked everybody. And people, even though in those times you got a lot of information, but obviously people being people, at the end of the day, there were lots of people who would give you false information, false platitudes, that no, no, they're very good people. Oh yeah, no, no, because nobody wants to say bad about another person, thinking that, maybe what I say might cost that person his future. But actually, what you're not saying is what is costing everybody their future, because you end up in bad marriages. So, as I said, despite the due diligence in the past, although it increased the safety and it decreased the risks, but still it was never 100% foolproof, right? And nowadays the problem is that you cannot find that information because the population is huge, and nowadays people have come from different places and settled in different places, and so people are not aware of their backgrounds. So for example, it's not like I'm living in a not me, but I mean generally, it's in the cities, especially in the urban areas. It's not like your neighbors know neighbors for long enough, because there's so many people, for example, who have come from remote areas and settled in cities. There are people who have come from villages and settled in cities. There are people who have newly come into money and you don't know how, and they've come and settled into these posh areas, because they want to be amongst the elite, because that's the whole point of why they earned all that. Ill-gotten gains, where they got their money from. So all the shortcuts that they used to make all this money, and which again you don't know how, and so they've come and now they're trying to mix and mingle amongst the elite, amongst the people with who already had money, or amongst the middle class, or amongst the educated, the academics, and this and that, whatever it is. And then again they want to go further, and then get into marriages and all. And so you have such people, so you don't know who was who. And so the next biggest scandal was, again, like that, where you had big homes, lots of cars, you're showing that the person is educated, it comes from blah, blah, this, that. And then when you get married, you find out that they're actually a whole family of beggars, professional beggars. In fact, there were stories about how many girls were literally drugged, at certain hours of the day or night, depending on what timings the beggars had to go out and beg. And so they would drug the girl, and so that she should be in deep slumber, and then they would lock her in and leave. And so again, girls had to run out of that situation too. Again, that shows a lot, again, about parents, where I always blame parents, that why the insistence on getting your children married. And okay, so these were lots and lots of cases. Another third very, very big scandal that broke out, which I think I mentioned in one of my podcasts, was when you had boys who are actually gays, and their parents are actually aware of it, but their parents like to pretend that they're not aware of it, or sometimes their parents are very openly aware of it, but they kind of convince their sons into marriage just for the sake of their reputation. They're like, okay, later on we can always divorce her, and then we'll blame her for everything, and then you can go your merry way, but we just have to prove to the world that there's nothing wrong with you. So they convince the boys to do that, and there have been many cases where it's happened, where the boys who were living abroad, or even here in Pakistan, then they would get married, and then if they're abroad, they would take their wives abroad, and then over there their wives would find out that they were gay, and then with great difficulty they would leave them and come back. Many cases, again in Pakistan, two gays or impotent or gays, and then the wives would have a hard time, because the problem is with such people is that their parents especially are enablers, and even if the boys themselves will not say or do anything, but the parents would then deliberately start gaslighting the girls, the in-laws. They would start gaslighting the girls into thinking that there's something wrong with the girls and that there's nothing wrong with the boys, and they would just put them in that kind of a weird mental situation where they would have breakdowns. So again, I've known such people. Now, this is like a whole lot about girls. Now, I'm going to talk about guys, because I have noticed one thing. It has nothing to do with gender. What I've noticed is, especially in countries like ours, but now of course it pertains to the whole world. But because I'm talking about my country, I'm just going to talk about my country and say that in countries like ours, the biggest problem that we face is that the decent people, they always get stamped on by everybody, whereas the a-holes, those certified a-holes, nobody does anything to them. Have you noticed that? Why is it? Call it a twist of fate, again, call it a sadistic aspect of God in the name of testing us. But I call this pure sadism too sometimes, when I think that I don't care that God is testing us, because I find this very, very sadistic, even on his part, especially on his part, that he could do such a thing. But I've noticed this. You never find good people meeting good people. It's become so rare now to find good people meeting good people. You usually now find either two good people bringing out the worst in each other so that they should really not be with each other, or you always find out this is the most common case, where there's a good person who ends up with this a-hole. And when you end up with a-holes, even when you manage to cut off from them, you don't do anything to them. But when you cut off from a good person, then you just have to go all out. We are way past the realms of decency. Okay, the reason why I keep on saying that our people are shameless, and our people they have no sense of self-esteem, and they have no sense of honor, they have no sense of of anything. I mean, they're such low lives, they're such gutter snipes, really, the mentality of the people here. And I'll give you again, this time I'm going to talk about males. Okay, there are three completely separate. Okay, I'll forget the third one, we'll talk about two. There are two extremely similar cases, but they started off very differently. For example, in one case, you have the one person that was actually a very dominating person, and it was not a meek person, not a timid person, but a person who actually, you would say that if his wife finally left him after years of marriage, you could not say she was wrong, because you could say that he was to blame. Okay, let's put it that way. That you can't say that she was wrong. He had a hand in it. He was to blame. But here's where things get really weird-assed. Fine, okay, you've decided to break up. You've decided that you've had enough, whatever. But one needs to be, fine, okay, so now you also want to show him that he shouldn't think so much of himself, and you want to take your revenge, and you've gone all out and taken your revenge. Okay, that is also fine. That's fine. But when you go overboard, so much so that you're actually now attacking your own mental health, and you're attacking the other person's mental. Listen, there are two ways to get through. If you have decided to get a divorce and you've decided to cut off, you can do that in a civilized way. Fine, as I said, you can use a little bit of time to exact your revenge too, and show him what's what. And once the message has reached, you need to now stop. There is a limit. You need to keep to that limit. And then, if you know that, okay, fine, there were lots of things said and done, but at the end of the day, if you look at your whole time in marriage, if you objectively look at it, and you have to admit that at the end of the day, he was still a good husband. Everybody has his flaws. Okay, you finally had enough. You couldn't bear his flaws, but he was still 1,000 times better than, the worst of the worst, which could have been your destiny. You were not in an abusive relationship, for example. You were not under domestic violence, for example. Fine, you had problems, you made up. You had problems, you made up. But now at the end, you don't want to make up. That's also fine. But when you start lying to your children against their father, again, this is why I find it so weird, because when the father is really an a-hole, I don't see those women talking about those a-holes with their children. I don't see women or their families talking against those a-holes. Have you noticed the reaction of women and their families who get away from a-holes is like, pretend they don't exist anymore. Just don't even take his name. Pretend he doesn't exist anymore. They don't talk against him, they don't talk about him, they just don't even want to think of him, right? But when you have a half decent person and you've decided to break off and cut off from them, why do you have to put so much energy into turning your children against him? It means that something's wrong, right? It means you have something to hide. It means you're scared about something. It means you know that you have also wronged him. And you don't want your children to choose him over you, or you don't want, again, it's weird because children become properties now. It's very rare that parents actually fight over custody of children because they actually love their children and want to keep them. Most times I've noticed that they fight for custody of their children just because they want possession. It's literally as if you're fighting over property. That's it. That's their property. They're fighting over their possessions and their property. Otherwise, at the end of the day, even if the girl keeps the children, it's her siblings, her parents, her family that are taking care of them. She's not. Most 9 times out of 10, this is what's going on, or at least 8 times out of 10, this is what's going on. And similarly, if the guy gets the custody of the kids, he's not there. Again, it's his parents, it's his family taking care of the kids. So why are you even fighting over the custody in the first place? Now, again, but this particular case that I'm now talking about, or these two, this case. So he is an excellent father and he loves his kids. And he, in fact, without even the court telling him to, he wants to participate in giving alimony. He wants to participate in paying for his children, their education, their needs, their wants, and everything. And yet, again, as I said, if somebody is showing at least this much decency, you need to meet that person halfway. You need to start a civilized conversation, a civilized bridging of the gap. Fine, you don't need to fall in love and get married all over again, but you need to start being civilized with each other. You need to recognize the fact that he's the father of your kids and he's sincere towards them. Fine, you had your problems, you don't want to make up anymore, you're divorced, whatever. But don't drag your kids. You see, this is how you end up making mentally disturbed people. You know, as I always say, parents are to blame. This is a very good example of how parents end up destroying their children's mental health. They end up growing up to be abnormal. And then we talk about broken homes. Remember how in the past there was always this thing about broken homes? Children from broken homes. No, you shouldn't get married to a person who comes from a broken home. Oh, no, you shouldn't. But you know what? Those children of those times of broken homes, I'm sure, are still 1,000 times much better and normal and able to maintain a family of their own as compared to now the children that you are producing today, where now they don't have to listen to the stuff about children from broken homes because almost every other home is a broken home. So now when you talk about children of broken homes, in fact, you will be met with a lot of dirty looks. And you will be treated as if you're the most stupid, most illiterate, uneducated, uncouth person ever, which is kind of true though. But now you're actually producing children of broken homes. Why? Because instead of maintaining a civilized relationship with your ex, who is ready and responsible and more than ready to continue participating in your children's lives, and instead you're feeding lies to your children, and in you are exaggerating the whole situation in front of your children, and you're going ballistic, and you're literally turning your children against him. Why? Don't you want your children to grow up in good terms with their father so that they can inherit his assets, his property, because they are entitled to it, they have a right to it? Why are you making your children against their father if he is actually a halfway decent man and he is meeting all your needs and he is more than happy to spend time with his kids? Even now, heck, he actually wants to spend time with his kids. I never understood that. You know, If you have a problem with your ex because he doesn't want to pay up, he doesn't want to pay alimony, he doesn't want to be participating in your kid's life, he's not fulfilling his responsibilities, that I would get. But why are women behaving like this with their exes who are actually ready and willing to participate? And again, you keep away, you stay away, but do not ruin your children's relationships with their fathers. If their fathers are at least halfway decent, and in this case, I can vouch for it. Okay? Now, here's another case. Another case is of a person who is this pure, pure person who is a very nice, very kind, very gentle person, very sensitive person. This person is so sensitive that he decided to give up his, he could have had lots and lots of lofty aims and goals in life, but he chose to stay with his parents rather than leave them alone. He chose to put his life again and again on the back burner in consideration for, his parents. Obviously, his parents didn't. His parents didn't like out and out tell him that, oh no, you can't go anywhere, you have to live with us and all. No, they didn't. But he was so sensitive that he could see that his parents would be alone, they would be heartbroken, especially his mother, who he was so attached to. He was such a sensitive soul that he couldn't bear to see anybody in any kind of pain or discomfort. And this person ends up getting married, which now to me again, this is what I would refer to as a marriage scam. Okay, pay heed now. This is a marriage scam because this is the kind of scam that is going on a lot in our country again, where you have girls who again are not from actually the same socioeconomic status as the boys that they are trying to seduce into marriage. They pretend to be something else, they come out to be something else, they come out to be from some weird ass village, and you don't even know if they're, again, the places that they claim to be educated from, if they actually did pass with a degree, or maybe they're the only ones who are educated in their whole household. You don't know. And so they are not decent people. In other words, they're not civilized, decent people with whom you can hold a civilized, decent conversation, to say the least. And yet you think that, again, because you're that kind of a person, that you think that, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, as long as we can live our lives together in harmony. And so, your parents get you married and you're okay with it because you like the whole thing, that you think that everything is fine. So you like the whole scenario and you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's fine. Because they're also, pretending and, pretending to be who they're not, and they're, lying through their teeth. And again, I would say that this is a very good example of how nowadays you just cannot find out the background, the exact background of people. And even if you ask a few people around them, it's not enough for them even to, or for you to find out who exactly they are, where they're from, what they're up to, what exactly is their whole status, what is their actual background, what kind of people they are, what is their family background, and then you end up with it's a marriage scam because they are basically getting their sister or their daughter married to you because they're thinking that, oh, you know what, you're born and bred abroad, you have a foreign nationality, and that means you have loads and loads of money and wealth. And when they realize that it's not easy to be able to steal, or to somehow deceive you out of that wealth, because you have a whole family there, and your parents are still alive, and they are not that stupid, and they know how to take care of their assets and everything. And so you start emotionally blackmailing, and then you come to threatening, and then you walk out on the person. And then not only do you walk out on that person, you continue to mentally torture that person, using your kids. So you know that that person is a sensitive soul, you know that that person is a caring person, you know that that person is a decent person, and so you're trying to now use all of that against him. And you know that that person would now do anything for his kids, and so you will try to torture that person. You wouldn't let him meet his kids. You will start spreading lies again, because you're in the wrong. You know that you're in the wrong, and you're scared that, that things might come out, and the children might, the one thing through which you're holding leverage, they might come out of your hand. And so you're now feeding poison into your children's brains against their father, and you're making them say and do stuff to him to hurt him. And so you see that these two cases that I'm saying, they began differently, but they ended in exactly the same way, even though for different reasons. So, but the exact same thing is happening in both cases, right? In both cases, the exact same thing is happening. The children are being snatched away. Custody rights are being taken away. Even if the court does say that, yeah, they do have custody rights, you come and make up lies and stories against the father so that you can revoke custody rights, and then you use those children to take money from him, or to take anything you want from him, to get a laptop, to get, I mean, what would a minor kid want with such sophisticated gadgets? It's obvious, and then you start asking for more and more money, you start asking for more and more stuff in the name of children, but you're not letting them meet their children. You're not letting them see their children. And then your brothers, your father, in both cases, again, it's weird. It's weird how identical it is in both cases. In both cases, the fathers and the brothers, they're the ones who are trying to threaten the boys and their families. Now, again, here's the difference, where on one side, the boy is fighting back, but on the other side, you have this boy who's so sensitive and so, he's that he can't even be bothered to fight back, because he's now fallen into depression. And he's fallen into such a deep, deep, deep depression that at the end, he gets so sick, and he doesn't even want to now care about his life or his health. He just wants to basically end it all, so he allows himself to self-destruct. He goes so deep into that shock, that depression, that he finally succumbs to his last breath. So two identical scenarios, completely identical scenarios. But in one case, it was actually a proper marriage gone wrong, but the girl's father and brother decide that they need to keep on and on torturing the guy so that he shouldn't feel that he can get away with anything, although he doesn't even want to get away with anything. So it's all a fight of ego. It's all the ego of men ruining their own daughters' lives or their own sisters' lives, for what? For worldly benefits, worldly gains, And in the second scenario, you have a marriage scam. From the way I identify it, to me, this is no less than a marriage scam, because you call it a gold digger, I'll call it a marriage scam, because a gold digger is still a scam, because you're marrying with the intention to get whatever you can from that person and take everything. I mean, imagine that you're literally trying to even take away the property of their families, not even their own property, but the property of their families. That is a marriage scam. And this is why I have a problem with marriages, because today we are not, in the good days, even, it was not foolproof. Investigating the parties, finding out the truth about them, trying to understand where they come from, finding the people who know them intimately, getting, the right information. In those good old times, even, it wasn't foolproof. Today, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. You don't know if the person next to you, who's seemingly so rich, who claims to be a businessman, you don't know if they're thugs from the village that have come and decided to use their sister to become a gold digger and try to now gain as much wealth as you can from the person she marries. You don't know if they are a family of beggars. You don't know if they are smugglers. You don't know if they're a family from the red light area in prostitution. You don't know if the person is gay. You don't know, because you see, people are thinking about how the media of Pakistan has been destroyed because you have now all these people who are desperate to make money. They've entered the media, and so the educated class, the decent class, the respectable class that actually began the whole TV industry in Pakistan, now they feel that they don't have a place in it because there's a lot of shamelessness. There is a lot of, westernized kind of now shamelessness. I mean, going on which was something you heard of and expected from the Western media and even the Indian media, but now it is more and more. It actually became very rampant a little more than 20 years ago in Pakistan. It is when I was in the media, I saw that it had already begun. The couch casting thing and all that shamelessness. It had kind of begun already, in the way that openly, as you know, because remember these things behind the scenes, and they have always occurred in the media. That is why people actually never liked their daughters, especially, or even their sons in educated families, to go to the media, is because of these exact rumors that they would hear every now and then. But the difference is, before it was still rare, but now it's become more and more open, so more and more frequent, and now people just don't care. They think that now it's something that you have to accept and deal with, which is wrong. Especially, again, when if you call yourself the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, then you should be extremely ashamed of yourself. And you cannot say that because it's the media, so it should be considered as a separate entity. It's not. You're still within the realms and the constitution of an Islamic Republic, right? But that's so people think that we have sort of soiled the media, right, the TV industry of Pakistan. But to be honest, these kind of people have now soiled our everyday lives, and they have insidiously moved into. And I'm sorry, I know in Islam we are not allowed to classify people according to their socioeconomic conditions or according to how much wealth they have or do not have. But the truth is that these things do tend to make a person who they are. For example, I keep on reminding everyone of Nawaz Sharif's family. If you look at Nawaz Sharif's family, why is it that they are still the way they are? Because remember, I said it's psychology. Psychology is when you begin from desperation, desperate poverty, then even if now you have 4 generations that have enjoyed wealth, they will still each generation will be instilled with that mindset that you have to keep on and on and on, and you have to keep treating everybody around you badly, and you have to keep on being the superior one, and you have to keep on being aware of people around you, and you have to be vigilant because anybody can steal everything from you. Why? Because we began like that. Because we began from zero, and we literally had to steal and do corruption and deception, and we basically earned haram. And so when you've earned haram and when you've reached that point of wealth, your biggest fear is going back to that nothing that you came from, right? But now there are those people who have struggled all their lives to make money. For them, because they are not earning haram, they're not earning through shortcut, but they're actually still struggling, and they're still earning, and bit by bit, slowly, they just made their wealth. Their only fear would be that they somehow need to keep up with the expenditures, despite all the wealth that they've made. Their fear is that, okay, they managed to struggle so hard to make this wealth and it can be lost just as easily. So they instill amongst their children good education. Get a degree, get a job. Okay, now you can do a business. Okay, now look at the risk factors. Calculate the risks first. Don't just step blindly into this. Don't waste money. That is how the way of thinking is developed and instilled on upon generation by generation. So as we say, easy come, easy go. The way you earn your money, it's in Islam as well. The way you earn your money is impacted upon your children. And then the way they earn it is impacted upon their children. So when you look at Zardari family and when you look at Nawaz Sharif family and when you look at Asim Munir, and you see that because they have ill-gotten gains, and you see how they became what they've become, you understand then why they are, remember I used to say in many of my podcasts when I talked about them, that when you give a slave the authority, then the first person that slave will turn and hurt is his own people, other slaves. When you give somebody who has nothing authority all of a sudden, and all of a sudden he comes into power, the first people that he is going to torment and torture and be cruel towards are his own people because he doesn't want to go back there. He's scared now to be back there in the gutter with them. So the first people that he is going to show deep hatred towards are the same people. And he will do anything and everything to dissociate himself from those people. And he will do anything and everything to maintain that power, that wealth that he has gotten. And so he will do anything and everything to kowtow to those people who are above him. And he will do anything and everything to be like them, to be among them, to be one of them. That is the psychology there. And in fact, it is because of that psychology that we tend to classify people based on their socioeconomic conditions. There is a logic behind it. There is a rationality behind it. And this is why even when it comes to marriage, one of my basic principles that I keep on and on talking about is it is always good to get married to a person whose background matches yours. It must match yours. Because when your background matches, then your mentality matches. Once your mentality matches, it means 90% of your conflicts are over before they even started. You have 90% peace and harmony. And then you only have to work towards that 10%, which are your individual traits that make you different from each other, and your own family's personal environments that make it different. And in that 10%, it is actually easier to compromise and to comply and to work together and to meet halfway. But when your actual background doesn't match, you have at least 98% conflicts to overcome throughout your marriage. And this is also why actually people prefer that they should get their children married within the family, extended family, within the tribe, extended tribe. Although in Islam, actually you are encouraged to marry out of the family, out of the tribe, so that you can, and which also makes sense, because when you start intermingling with different tribes, different families, and that is when these things that make you also different from tribe to tribe and family to family and background to background, at one point, finally, all these differences are gone. They basically disappear. And so then you all have that one universal background that matches at least. For example, here's a universal background that matches. If a Muslim marries a Muslim. Now here's another universal background that matches. If somebody who was born and bred abroad marries another person who's born and bred abroad. And that is where, again, as I said, 90% of your clashes are gone, just like that. 90% harmony prevails in your marriage. But when you think that getting married within the family works that way, that is not necessarily so. Because when you're getting married within the family, then the thing that you actually have to look at is how your immediate background varies. Does it match or not? Because as I said, just because you're one family or extended family or within the tribe doesn't mean that your background would match. Although it is with that logic that people tend to get these marriages done. But as I said, nowadays, that's not how it's working anymore. Because now, even within families, there are so many socioeconomic differences and so environmental factors that come at play, nurture versus nature come at play, and problems occur, especially because in family, your family politics begin. And the thing I find the most weirdest in countries like ours is when the parents don't get along, but they want their children to get married. Like, what is that? Why do you want your children to get married when you guys are at loggerheads with each other? Like, what are you trying to do here? And then family politics begin, and then there's this whole line of just bad family politics going on for generations. So it doesn't make sense. What makes sense is, again, the actual background of your family, your own family. It should match with the family that you want your kids to get married into. And then you also have to see their mentality. That is the third most important thing that you must see. Do their mentalities match? And that is why, actually, in Islam, it is incumbent upon the potential couple to see each other and to converse with each other so that they have a pretty good idea of how they think. When you have an idea of how the other person thinks, because listen, here's one thing you need to understand. When you're actually trying to get a proposal done, and you're too busy impressing people, both parties are too busy impressing other people, that they end up lying to each other. And that is one of the biggest problems that occur, that when after marriage you realize all the lies. So when you end up with that kind of a situation, those marriages never end well, which, as you have seen, I've pointed out that to me it's a marriage scam. Okay, so let's now bring in a girl. Now here's another example, and this is a girl this time, and her husband is an a-hole, and they are exactly the same thing, which I would also refer to as a scam. To me, it's a scam, again, when you pretend to be something else, especially when it's the boy. Again, remember, with the boy's family, the thing is that if they pretend that they are very rich, very broad-minded, very outgoing, very this, very that, and on paper they seem to be the ideal family that you're looking for, and then they when you get engaged, the boy is taught by his parents to go all out and to make you feel as if he'll treat you like a princess. And then the day you get married, the first thing that the boy and his mother would come and tell you is that, you remember all these all these things that we did to make you think that you're a princess? Yeah, it's going to stop now because now you're married. So you're literally telling the girl very openly that, oh, guess what? We were deceiving you this whole time just so that we could get this marriage done. So that is, again, marriage. It is a marriage fraud, and especially then when you have to end up being suffocated in a family that is full of hypocrites, where they are constantly trying to dominate the daughter-in-law now, and they're using their son to they're actually not even allowing the couple to live in harmony. And so, if anything, they are making their son against his own wife, and then ensues domestic violence, and ensues a lot of abuse, and ensues, which leads to divorce or separation or whatever. And as I said, remember, it's amazing how the a-hole guys, when the girls leave them, they and their brothers and their fathers and their mothers, they don't do anything to them. But when you leave a decent guy, a decent guy ends up with a bitch, whose brothers and fathers come out to be these thugs from some pind, you know. But when you're a decent girl, you end up with an a-hole. It's weird. Okay, and I find that it's so common now. Actually, that's the biggest problem, is it's so common now. You have all these kind of misfit marriages, where if the guy is decent. Yeah, there was another two guys I can now talk about, in the recent past years, who one of them actually fell into depression as well, because the girl who he married, the very next day she upped and left, because she said that, I didn't even want to marry you because I actually liked somebody else, and my parents knew it, but they forced me to marry you. But you know what, I can't. So basically, she was rebelling against her parents, which is Islamically her right, because in Islam, this marriage wasn't valid anyway, and it is 100% her parents' fault, because, as I said, the Prophet himself would break all these marriages in which the parents convinced their girls or forced their girls to get married. And in Islam, the girl and the boy have the right to choose their spouse. And if a girl says, I want to marry this person, then it's the parents' duty, actually, to go and then, fulfill all the protocols. They need to go, they need to work with her, they can do their investigation, find out about the family, sit down, discuss with her. If they find something odd, let her make the decision. If she still wants to pursue it, it's her decision. You can't stop her. It's the same with the boy. If a boy wants to get married to a girl, it's the parents' duty. In Islam, it is their duty. It's written in the Quran. It is their duty to mediate on behalf of their son. It is their duty to go to that girl's house and ask for her hand in marriage. Again, after all the due diligence is done, you have the right to do your due diligence. You must do your due diligence, but you must discuss it properly and honestly and objectively with the child who wants to get married, because he's not a child anymore anyway. He's an adult now, and he is independent, and he's earning his own money. Yes, he bloody well can get married. If he's not independent, if he's not earning any money, if he's completely dependent on you, then yes, then Islamically he's not even allowed to pursue marriage anyway. He's not allowed to pursue marriage. He's then told to go and make himself independent first, and meanwhile keep himself busy. This is also an Islamic rule. So again, I would say it is a duty of the parents to go on the behalf of their independent, mature sons and daughters to the other party in order to talk about marriage. If they have made their declaration, if the girls or the boys have made their declaration that I want to marry this person. So what these parents did by forcing the girl to get married, and her retaliation is valid, I'm sorry, but her retaliation was 100% valid. But in her bid to take revenge from her parents, by saying, okay, fine, you're forcing me into this marriage, fine, you just see what I do to your reputation. And yes, now she is fine that she's justified in ruining her parents' reputation by walking out. But what she's also now done, in her fit of anger and everything, again, as I said, she's not wrong, but the problem is the fallout here, the consequences here, is that you just ruined the mental health of a perfectly innocent man who had no knowledge about what the hell it was going on. In fact, you know what you should have done is what actually people had the sense to do in the, again, olden times. In the olden times, when arranged marriages were, because we had a pagan culture. So in our pagan culture, arranged marriages were the only way you could get married, and you were never allowed to choose your own marriage. And even though later on people turned to Islam, but they kept that pagan culture because they thought it was somehow so much more decent. Like, okay, so you actually have a problem with Islam saying that you must not choose the spouses of your children, but that they must choose their own spouses. You suddenly thought that, oh, this is so scandalous of Islam to do that. No. I mean, just look at the hypocrisy. That's what I'm telling you, that actually it's not even the non-Muslims, but even the Muslims don't want real Islam. The Muslim men especially, they do not want real Islam in their countries because they have no standing in real Islam. under Islamic law, if real Islam was practiced, men and parents, all these people who are going on their power trips, they have no standing. And that's why they're scared. And so to them, Islam telling them that they had no right to arrange their children's marriages was so scandalous that they started lying to their children, saying that no, in Islam, even, it's arranged marriage, when it's not. It's not. It's black and white. It's in Islam, it's a sin to force your children to get married, because that marriage is now not even a marriage according to Islam. It's there you have made them commit adultery, because Islamically that's not even a marriage. It's not accepted. So Islam doesn't accept your marriage as marriage. So you're fornicating. So you've actually committed that sin, if you want to go deep into that, you know. So as I said, parents, I think the girl should have done what in those times when children were pushed into arranged marriages did. They had more common sense, it seems, than the people today, for all their freedom. In those times, the girls or the guys would call each other out and say, we need to talk. And then they would tell them that, listen, I don't want to marry you, and I want to marry somebody else, or I just don't want to marry right now, and I would be much obliged if you could help me out here by refusing to your parents. And so when they both refuse to their parents, what can the parents do? If the girl also says no, and then the boy also says no, what can they do? And it was done like that many times, actually. So now, with all your modern, freedom and everything, you found it so difficult to just call the guy and tell him that, listen, I actually like somebody else and my parents are forcing me into this marriage. Can you kindly just break it off? Because they're pressurizing me and I can't break it off. Can you please break it off and save us both hell? And obviously the boy was so decent. He's so decent. He could have simply said okay, and he could have done it. He could have told his parents, you know what, let's not pursue this. It's a dead deal here. It's a dead end. And his parents, being the cool people that they are as well, they would have backed off. Again, as I said, it's always the decent people who get the rotten end of the stick, isn't it? That guy almost did his head in depression, and I'm just glad that somehow he managed to get out of it. I guess it's because he had. Well, it wasn't easy, to be honest. Yeah, no. He also required a few years to get out of his depression. And then I think, and he didn't even want to get. After that, even if his mother just talked about marriage, he's like, don't you even dare talk about marriage to me at this point, And everybody backed off. He was in such deep state of depression. So again, I would say, despite the fact that I am a person who normally tends to take the girl's side, because in majority cases it is the girl who is the victim, the hurt party, but this shows that you also have guys who are victims, of such kind of horrendous scenarios where they are constantly being victimized even after they're divorced, and they go into deep depression. So I'm giving you 3 different guys. All 3 of them went into a state of depression. One of them managed to come out, thankfully. One of them succumbed to his death. One of them is struggling and has finally come a little bit out of his depression. And in fact, the last time I talked with him, I just roared and vented about my own depression so that he could focus on me instead of focusing on his depression. So that was one positive thing that I think I could do, that he was so busy now consoling me to get out of my depression that he literally started feeling, he literally started telling me that, I was at a deep end like you. And I'm like, no, man, you haven't yet been there. And I'm just glad you haven't been there, So He actually is, his parents are helping him get out of it. His So yeah, but he's right. When you're in depression and you're alone, but to be honest, when you're in depression, you are alone, even if you have people around you. The other two are a good example. The one who finally succumbed, to his depression and lost his life to it. He he had family, very, 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 very loving family, everybody there to comfort him and all, but he couldn't get out of it because some things just become the last straw. And again, as I said, if you're a good, pure, sensitive soul, or even if you're a halfway decent person, I think the other party owes it to you to just put a stop. One should know where to stop. I think that the height of shamelessness and the height of greed and for example, listen, as I said, this life is not the be all end all. This life is just a temporary transit. We're on our way back to our real life where we've come from. Why is everybody making this life out to be everything? Why is everybody hell bent on trampling on everybody else? Why is everybody trying to take a power trip? Why is everybody so selfish that they want everybody to take care of their needs, their wants, their moods, but they refuse to take care of the other person's needs, wants, and moods? I mean, why? We always talk about how everything is give and take, but people are all about taking. And those very few people who give, they just end up dying giving. Whereas those who take, they then move on to the next person to take. Why? So, right now, what I'm saying is marriages are right now the ultimate doom of people. It is taking people's mental health away. It is taking people's lives away. It is right now one of the most toxic things that you can get yourself into. We need to start taking a break from all of these toxic peer pressures that we're being put into. We need to just learn to just tell everybody to shut the front door and get the hell out. Okay? I know it's not easy. After all, as I said, those of us who end up in depression, we end up in depression because we are so busy trying to keep peace and harmony. We are so busy trying to care about other people, even though they're not even worth it. We're taking care of their moods and their mood swings and their devaistic problems and their selfishness and their narcissism and their, complexes. And we're always putting them first. We're always putting ourselves last until it takes a toll. And when does it take a toll? When we now actually want to catch a breath, but we're not getting it. Remember, I've talked extensively about this, about how important it is to get out of everything. And when you want to get out, when doctors talk about a change, they don't mean, oh, just get out of your house and go to the garden outside. No, a change means a complete change. It means not looking at the faces of anybody and everybody that you know or do not know. It means completely getting out of wherever it is that you are, even if it has to be leaving the country. It means going to an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar people and an unfamiliar environment, so that it's as if you've completely cut yourself off. It's literally like how we say, or how I say, that in death we find our respite, because then finally it is ended and then we can start anew. It's that, okay? You need to end whatever it is and go and start afresh. But if the same people are going to be with you, or if the same scenarios are going to be with you, or if the same environment is going to be with you, what the hell is that going to do to help you? That is not change. Yes, there are some people who need people around them. They will tell you, and you can be with them. But mostly when we go into deep depression, we cut ourselves off from people, which is actually not a bad thing. It is a good defensive mechanism. But the problem is we are unable to cut ourselves off the way we need to, which means leaving the country, leaving the people, leaving the places, completely cutting ourselves off, which our parents are so useless, to be honest. They do not leave us alone. If nothing else, they'll start calling you. Even if you manage to leave the country, then they'll start calling you. Like, do you even know what a break means? Do you even know what a change means? Do you even know what it means when it is said that I need a break? People are so busy getting offended by people who say we need a break. You know, your timeline and our timeline is different. You belonged to a time when you really did not have the kind of an assiduous life that we have. You did not have the kind of a toxic life that we have. Our lives are far more toxic. Our lives do not even have a moment's gap in between for us to catch that breath. You had loads and loads and loads of moments to catch your breath. And this is why also we are now mentally easily vulnerable now. We're easily prone to go into depression as compared to people before us, generations before us. Again, they had loads and loads of breathing space. Their time was such. Their time had lots and lots of gaps in between it. The lifestyle was slow. There was more harmony, more balance, more peace. Our lifestyle is completely unbalanced. There is no harmony, there is no peace. We do not even have the luxury to take a moment's breath. Heck, it doesn't even exist. We have to look for that moment to get that breath. It's different. Our lives are different, our problems are different. Right now, life in itself has become a stranglehold. Before, life was not a stranglehold. Before, life was a platform in which you had your struggles. Now, life is the struggle itself, and life is the stranglehold itself. And you need to understand that. And this is why we also need to recondition our minds in a different way now. We need to uncondition our minds, and then we need to unlearn whatever it is that we've learned. We need to undo whatever it is that we can undo from our minds. We need to evolve again, and we need to start once again recollaborating our root, our mental root, our spiritual root, our life roots, right? And we need to stop allowing marriages, as I said, because marriage, the reason why marriage can now be one of the biggest source of people getting unhinged, of people dying and killing, of people committing suicide or murdering their whole families, it's because it is a whole baggage. And it is not a baggage that you can just throw down and run away, which is what it seems to be the norm in Western countries and in certain modern Asian countries, maybe. But in majority of the Asian and African countries, it is still taboo. This is one baggage you cannot throw, and you're not allowed to throw. And so why take in that baggage in the first place when you're not ready? We think we're ready. We think we're ready to get married, and we think we're ready for it all. But the truth is we are not, because life is not what it used to be. Time is not what it used to be. And again, as I said, we need to stop and we need to recollaborate. We need to recalculate. We need to start rerouting. We need to understand that marriage is now that equation that we have to very, very, very carefully calculate into our lives. We can't just jump into it, because the repercussions of going into relationships and marriages are so deep. They are so deep in the way they will implicate us, in their impact, that they can literally destroy us. We need to be very, very careful now with all those decisions that can completely change our whole life as we know it. I'm not against marriage, but I am against blindly going into anything in life that you know has a lifetime repercussion, especially with the kind of mentalities that we have now, the kind of mental health levels that we have now, the kind of lifestyles that we have now, the way life is pushing us now. We need to be very careful. Please do not jump into relationships. You need to reprioritize your life. Relationships are not your life. Romance is not your life. Marriage is not your life. These are just parts of your life. You need to sit down and reconfigure what your life really is, what it should be. You need to start having goals. You need to start thinking about your inner health. You need to start thinking about your mental health. You need to start thinking about your life goals. You need to start understanding your purpose in this life. You need to start seeing what this life has to offer. We need to stop limiting ourselves to this cycle. We need to sit down, breathe. We need to make sure that we are ready for whatever it is then that we need to do next in our lives. We must now reprioritize our lives. And marriage scam is now one of the biggest scam industries in the world. Now when we call people gold diggers, it's not a harmless, it never was harmless, but we kind of tended to now make it into some sort of a thing that, oh, they're still harmless now compared to the other marriage scams that have come up. But believe me, gold digging is just one of those marriage scams, and it is equally or can be equally dangerous. Please be careful before you throw your children into this lifetime commitment that can mess with their brains and their lives. And please do not encourage your children to just blindly go and get into relationships or marriages or children. You know, it is a part of their life. If they have it in their destiny, it will come to them at the right time. Please do not try and play God here, because when things go wrong, then you decide to blame God, but He is not to blame. You are entirely to blame, because that time you didn't remember that there was a God that existed above and that He has plans for everybody and that we should stop interfering with their paths. Please leave people alone. Let them understand their paths in life. Let them go with the flow. If you really believe in God, which you all claim to, if you really believe in God, if you really have faith, you wouldn't do these things that you're doing. If marriage is in somebody's destiny, it will happen and at the right time, and it will be smooth and it will be lovely. Okay? And if it's not, it will not happen, and pushing them into it will only create carnage. And if it is in their destiny to have a bad marriage, then you need to understand that nowadays, as I said, we're not living in that kind of life or time that you people lived in before us, where life was slow. There was always the time to catch your breath. Right now, life in itself is a stranglehold. Understand the meaning here. We cannot catch our breath. You have to catch it then. You have to understand the repercussions here. This is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.